Hi everybody, Steve Farmer here. Once again, it is time for the U.S. Chess League. The Arizona Scorpions kicked off their season on August 27th. That was also the opening day for the Suggenfeld Cup being played in St. Louis. That is supposed to be the strongest chess tournament in history. Again, there's only 6 players, but they're the highest players, so it makes for an interesting matchup. And you can watch them live, if you'd like, on the USChessChamps.com website, and you can also check out a delayed video, if you'd like, after the round is over in the evening at St. Louis Chess Club. So check out those sites. It's an exciting time of year for chess. As I said, we got the Suggenfeld Cup, we have the U.S. Chess League just getting started. Also, Maurice Ashley has the Millionaire Chess Tournament coming up in October. So it's a very busy time for chess players. Now, if you would like to watch the U.S. Chess League live, you certainly can do that. You need to be a member, or I believe you can sign on as a guest to the ICC, chessclub.com. Now, as always, I will be doing video news and maybe an article. I'll try and do one for each matchup that they have. Now, my time is short because I have a lot of irons in the fire right now and a lot of things to do. I'm getting ready for a tournament myself, and I'm coming out of retirement, so there's a lot to catch up on. So these will mostly be recaps and not full in-depth analysis of the games themselves like I usually do. Some people will like that, and some people won't. So sorry. Maybe after I get done with my tournament, I can devote a little more time to what's going on in the Chess League. Also, I like to follow the games from the Suggenfeld Cup, so as soon as I get done recording this, I'm going to go and watch the tape delay version of that. Okay, so on to the Scorpions. In this first week matchup, the Scorpions are pitted against the Seattle Sluggers. What's the big news? Well, Lev Altunian has gone missing in action. Lev will not be with the team this year, but with the new rules of the league, he may well be able to return at a later date. Just exactly where is Lev? Well, maybe this video will help put a little spotlight on that.
Get away! Get away! Record it! They're going to try to beat the fuck out of us! Record it! Get away! Don't drop! You're pussy! What the fuck is
Okay, that's not Lev, thankfully. Now, Lev has a lot of irons in the fire as well, and he needs to take some time off to sort things out. Still, I'm a bit worried as to how well the Scorpions will do this year in the absence of their MVP not playing. Yep, the MVP, Lev Altunian. Check out the stats at the U.S. Chess League site. This guy really rocks in league play, and he'll be missed this year. With more news for the Scorpions, when I tuned into the ICC to watch the games live, my heart sank even a bit further when I noticed that our lead player, Mackenzie Molnar, was not playing. This is crucial as this was a division matchup, and with the new league layout, divisional matchups are extremely important. Now, I'm not going to begrudge Mac, of course. You know, we all have a life to live, and the USCL is not the end-all to beat-all. But it is sort of bragging rights for the players and for their respective communities and their followers. Okay then, who did show up? Well, on board one we have Joel Vanawa. He's rated 2454, and he's playing for Arizona and has the white pieces. And he's playing Paul Anka at 2497 for Seattle. I kind of like his music. Wait, wrong Anka. It's actually Emil Anka. He's a grandmaster. That's much different. Joel had his hands full in this game, but he's a capable player with nerves of steel. He played a cautious opening and got a bit of an edge, and just like a rock climber who only needs a finger hold on a ledge, is able to overcome the GM in this encounter to score the point. Chalk one up for Arizona and for the FIDE Master to take down the Grandmaster. Nicely done, Joel. Let's take a quick look at this game. Now, we're not going to be devoting too much time to any single game, and definitely not to the opening, so we're going to breeze through this really quickly here. We have a Nimzo Indian, pretty standard stuff, and Bishop B7 here. Yeah, C5 is playable, but okay. Bishop takes F6 now, Queen takes, and so he's got erect pawn structure, and now he takes time to get more space on the queen side. Now, interestingly, in this position, Yassir back in 2003 played knight e2. Not much of a difference between the two, but I like b4 better. Why not grab that space while it's there? Of course, b3 would just lose the knight, so he retreats back to c6. And pretty standard cautious play by white in all of this. Black seeks to create some kind of counterplay. His weak pawn structures really dictates that he's going to have to try something active here. So he tries this break. And now knight takes d5, knight to b5. I think white's got a clear edge here. Yeah, I think that white is clearly better. You know, I would definitely want to play white. If for nothing else, that black has 3 pawn islands, white only 2, and white has a bishop versus knight. Now, a rook and knight is a pretty good combination. Queen and knight is better, but I think a rook and bishop is a better combination than a rook and knight in an endgame. I read that in a book somewhere, so it must be true. But the salient points here are is the knight's well posted on d5, so if it can stay there, black's okay. But Joel's not going to let it stay there. Of course not. And the fact that there are pawns on both sides of the board also weighs in white's favor to the bishop. So play from here continued with a5. And sadly, this is as far as I got on the game score. Let's see if I can find it elsewhere. Yeah, things didn't look right there. He actually played king to g7. And the game progressed with e4. Can't let that knight stay on d5. It's too nice of a post. And you'll never dominate the knight if it is allowed to have a good post. So a lot of these moves. Now I got to tell you, Joel did give us a bit of a scare a time or two here, letting the clock run really close to letting his flag fall, but he had it under control. And this is technically, I think this is just a one ending for white. And Joel plays it very well. Now, though that I'm showing this is the first game, this is actually next to the last to finish. I think this finished just before Pedram resigned in his game. So we're just going through this endgame here. So we see that white's got an outside pass pawn. That's a big trump to have. Black's trying to limit white's play with his bishop, but he's using the rook to do that. Now gets behind the pawn, but Joel activates his king, checks, king c5, rook a3, king c4 has got to drop back, knight e8. Now, snag the pawn. Emil tries knight to d6, trying to get some active piece play here. King to d4, and now f5. This is to try and cut off communication between the a pawn and the rook, which it does, but it brings up another disaster for him. Now knight to f7, g4. I was actually expecting maybe a6 here, I don't know, but he goes g4, looking for active play. Rook to a4 check. Bishop c4 blocking, f takes, h takes, now he takes the a pawn, now bishop takes e6, so white's got 2 passed pawns and pretty dominant pieces if you ask me. Rook checks, well we blocked with the bishop before, it should work again. King g6, king c5, and now knight to g5 was played. And this is a horrible blunder because after bishop d3, the knight is lost. Of course, he can play the knight to e5 and block the check, but white just then would play king to d5, and the knight is lost. So seeing this, Emil resigned. So that's our first game. 1-0 for Arizona. On board 2, we had Costin Cosiano. Sorry if I'm butchering your name there, Costin. Costin is playing white for Seattle. He's rated 2466, and he's up against Mark Ginsburg. Now, Mark is a KG veteran, many years experience under his belt, many years. He's been playing as long as I have. And he is rated 2397, so he's the underdog. Okay, well, in this game, it was a strange game. Mark traded off into what I thought was simply a poor endgame with 4 rooks on the board. It was certainly a messy affair. White played a bit recklessly, and Mark's vast experience in the game provided him with the intuition that his kingside pawns would force the issue. And force things they did. So let's go through the opening of this real quick. And we have a closed Sicilian. And Mark handles it in a very unique way here. I'd like to try this in some point. And already I think black is doing better here. Well, actually here I think queen d6 is probably a little better. But I think black is okay here. Traded queens, knight a5. Again, look at this. Just like on board 1, there's a slew of bad pawns on the enemy's camp. Got doubled c-pawns, isolated double c-pawns, isolated a-pawn. So he's got 3 pawn islands, the black's 2. Okay, against the veteran, I would not do this. I would avoid this kind of structure. Alright, well, let's go on. Yeah, black looks to be just fine here. Yeah, a little bit complicated play, not much. Okay, of course, white would love for black to take the bishop so he can straighten out his pawns, but you know what? Tain't no way. Okay, bishop h3 is played. Rook to d5 is probably a little bit better, but now knight takes d4. It hits the rook, so he doesn't have a chance to straighten out his pawn structure. He takes the knight on a5, and now knight f3. I don't know. There's something to be said for knight to c6, rook d5, bishop e8. You know, this is about equal. Okay, knight f3. Bishop takes bishop, knight takes, king takes, rook takes. Now this is where I was a little confused about how things are here. I just thought this was a very messy way for Mark to go. I would have preferred to keep some minor pieces on to try and target the weak pawns in combination with the rooks and maybe provoke a further weakening. However, Mark seems to have this figured out, and he's probably already seen the concept that he follows in the game. Okay, well, one thing's for sure, the king is in check, so he's got to do something about it. And instead of trying to move the king and going after the a-pawn, which, you know, Mark could just play a6, he moves rook to d5, hoping to straighten out his pawn structure somewhat again. But rook to e7, king d3 protects the pawn. Now rook f6 to get some lateral movement going, maybe run over and hit the a-pawn and cause havoc over there. c5 might be white's best chance here, because a4, white's best chance. I think that white is still probably a little bit inferior here. Not much, though. It looks to me, I thought it was going to be a draw, but I think that Mark had already seen the path that he chooses in the game. Rook b2, and now he liquidates down to a single rook ending, which allows him to grab a pawn. However, out of this deal, white gets a pawn. And now here I thought rook to d7, just going for the draw was the way to go. But look what Mark comes up with. Plays f3. Very sharp. Gives up this a pawn. Now rook to e2 check. King to d3. Now g4. This is brilliant. He's making a way for his king to come in and help nurse the pawns up the board. Okay, well what about white's pawns? He's got 3 passers over there that aren't even being blocked by anything. Well, okay, his rook is in the way. But in the meantime, black's got to get past that defender on f2. Well, that defender on f2 is a goner. Now, maybe Casiano could have played rook to h7, but I think after rook takes f2, rook h6 check, king to g5, I think black is winning this. So he played rook check on a6, king g5, and now he plays rook a5 check, and he could have tried c5 here. But still, I think, even after this, rook a8, I still think that black is winning this. I'll leave that up to you if you want to look at this. It's a very complex endgame, but I think white is too slow in this line. So, rook to a5 check, but this allows king h4, rook to f5 so that he can't push g3, rook takes f2, and now c5. Alright, it looks like this pawn's just going to run up the board and queen. But watch this, rook a2, c6, rook takes pawn, c7, and rook a8. Stops it just in the nick of time. Now rook f7. If he brings his king closer, white if white plays king to e3, we can always play king to g3 and then check with the rook and usher the f pawn up the board. Whoops. In the game he played rook to f7, and now king to g3. And again, for some reason, my score stopped here. Let me see if I can fix that problem. No, actually, that's it. I just checked the US Chess League site, and this is where Kostin resigned. He can't move his pawn forward anymore, and meanwhile, we can see that it's going to be very easy for Mark to move the f-pawn up the board and promote, winning the rook and the game. Very, very wonderful play by Mark. Very good. Experience wins out. Yay for us older guys. All right. So let's get on to the next game. Okay, on board 3 we have Robbie Adamson playing white for Arizona, and he's playing Tian Sang, also a FIDE master. And let's get on with the opening in this one. Robbie opens e4, knight f3, and now c3, the Ponzi scheme. I mean the Ponziani opening. This is a deceptive opening, folks. Even Magnus has played this. Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, and not too long ago. So don't let this seemingly slow opening really fool you, because it can pack a lot of venom. For one, after this move, queen a4 can be played. Now pawn takes, knight takes, knight is pinned on c6, queen d5, and so now what do we have that's so typical of the Seattle players, at least in tonight's matchup? You guessed it, bad pawns. 3 pawn islands versus 2. Like I said, this is not enough to win the game on its own, but it's damn close. Alright, let's press on. Bishop c4 was played. Queen d7, castles. Knight f6, d3. E takes d3. Even though he trades this far extended pawn, it still does not change his number of pawn islands. And it actually opens up the center, and white's a little bit better developed. He's castled already, he's got his bishop out and his queen out. Now Robbie took a well on this move. He took a well on quite a few moves here, but it's not a big deal because the game is well in hand. He played bishop takes d3. Okay. If black takes, then obviously the fork on c6 is coming, so he avoids that, and he protects that pawn. Previously seen here were both bishop e7 and bishop d6. So there are games in this line. Now Robbie comes up with a novelty after bishop b7. He plays queen to c2. And I think it's the strongest move. Other moves have been rook e1 check, bishop a6, queen to b3, but I like Robbie's move the best. Keeps a powerful punch in case black wants to go kingside castling. He decides to take the pressure off by weakening his structure on the king side, so now he doesn't have a good solid structure anywhere. Of course, he's getting ready to fianchetto that bishop, but after rook check, he can't do that. I guess he could. He'd have to move the king. What's the point in that? So he plays bishop to e7, and now bishop c4. I thought knight a3 was a good idea, and it just seems like white's got a clearly better position. Bishop c4 is just fine. And now black does castle. And now knight to d2. c5 was played, trying to give scope to that bishop on b7. Bishop f1. f3 was playable, but that's not a move that many people would like to play. Rook fe8. Knight c4. Bishop d6. And now Robbie takes the opportunity to trade some material. He could play bishop g5, which I thought was a little better, but trading seems okay. And now bishop to d2. He could play knight takes d6, but why do this? It simply straightens out the pawn structure. He's still got 3 pawn islands, but at least he doesn't have double isolated c-pawns. So bishop d2, bishop to e4, queen to c1. Alright, the computer is calling this position equal, but I'd have to say white's a little bit better. White wants to try and get in bishop f4, and if he can remove that bishop, it is the main protectorate of the pawns on the c-file, and that might give white some good chances. Queen to f5 was played here to stop bishop f4. Now knight takes d6. Going back, maybe it was better to play bishop f8 in light of what we're about to see here, and after bishop g5, queen e6, and now maybe f3. It's about equal. But after queen f5, Robbie took on d6. And after c takes d6, someone in the chat room just said, okay, well, black is just better here. I don't agree. White's got the bishop pair. I think white's a bit better here. Not just better, just a little bit better. But certainly enough to really go on and play against these weakened pawns. And it's the bishop pair versus bishop and knight. Is it winning? No. Is it close? You get into something where you could say it's close to winning. Or close to having a clear advantage, I should say. Right now it's just an edge. Rook to e6 was played. Maybe bishop to d3 here was worth a shot. But okay, rook to e6. Queen to d2. Okay, bishop d3 can't be played now. And now for some reason, Tien played bishop d5. He should bring the bishop all the way back to c6. He plays bishop d5. Bishop c6, I don't think he needed to worry about bishop takes d6 because of knight e4. Now queen f4, knight takes d6, queen f5, knight takes f5. That doesn't look good for white. So bishop c6 had more merit. I think in this position white has to play f3, knight d5, and bishop h6 or something along that line. And I think white is a tad bit better here. But in the game continuation, Tien played bishop to d5. And now f3 was played. And all of a sudden, black's queen is really running out of places to go. g4 is the threat. He plays knight h5, and Robbie plays bishop h6. Now, the idea is you play g4, you can play queen takes f4, so that's why Robbie gets the bishop out of the way. I don't know about the optics of this opening. It's the Ponziani, so everybody automatically thinks, okay, black is going to have a better game out of this. And, a few people were saying, okay, now white's better because black's attack is dissipated. Well, I really didn't see that black had an attack. He was just trying to play positionally and try and not suffer too much from the weakened pawn structure he had. I didn't personally see an attack there for black. Oh yeah, you could always make some really bad moves and walk into mate, but I don't think that was the case here. So queen e5 was played here. And now Robbie played rook to d1. Okay, well, the bishop is hit, so he's got to do something. And here he needs to try bishop takes f3. It looks like suicide. Whoops. But he's trying to get this bishop. And then after this, he can play rook to g6. Although, in this line, I think white is clearly better. But this is certainly better than what occurred in the game after knight f6. Bishop f4, I think, is just flat out winning for white. And here, Tien plays queen h5, which only hastens the end. But perhaps queen f5, c4, bishop c6, bishop takes d6. It keeps him in the game, but it's a really tough struggle for black to play on in a situation like this. White's just dominating. Okay, his bishop on f1 is the sad little piece in the game, but it'll come out and it'll find activity on the b1 h7 diagonal. White's in control here. Queen h5 though. This allowed g4 to be played. It was not. Robbie opted for c4. And after I saw this on the board, I was like, okay, that makes really good sense. But let's take a look at g4 here. I mean, this is the most obvious move, right? And after knight takes g4, you don't take back on the knight. You take on d5 with the queen. But, black can try knight e5. This is a little bit muddy, but it's still winning. So instead of g4, Robbie took his time and looked at this position in some good depth. So he played c4 after all this thinking. And now it turns out that black still has to give up the piece. And he does it on f3. But now after bishop to g2 and queen to g4, h3, the queen's getting pushed around. If she goes to h4, white can take, queen takes c4, and then b3, white is clearly in control here. In the game, he played queen h5, rook to e1, you're up in material, trade off pieces, and your bishops are dominating. Those Horowitz bishops right there. The trade does happen, and queen to f5, bishop takes d6, snaring a pawn. Queen to d3, queen to e7, Tien threw in a spike check, and after king h1, black resigned. Okay, his only way out of immediate mate threats is to play h5, but after bishop e5, well, I guess he's got another check, but that's it. After king h2, there's nothing left for black. Oh, he could play knight to g. He can play knight to g4 check, but we just take it, and we're still threatening with mates on the black king. Very nice game by Robbie. Nice way to start the season, Robbie. Keep up the Ponzi schemes. So, if you're keeping score, that is 3 wins for Arizona, 0 for Seattle. In all 3 of the games we saw so far, Seattle allowed themselves to have weakened pawn structures. Well, we come down to board 4, and William Schill is playing white for Seattle, and he shows the rest of the team how not to ruin your pawn structure. And he's playing Pedram Atufi, and it started out with e4, and we have knight c6 and d6, bizarre opening, and we transpose into a Peertz of sorts. And black loses some tempos here, but due to the closed nature of the opening, it's not so critical. And play here is pretty logical and easy to understand. And after queen a5, I know the computer is going to say white's a little bit better, yada, 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 but this is a playable position for black in my opinion. Yes, he is down on time. It's going to be hard to castle because the queen on d2 and the bishop on e3 are eyeing that pawn on h6, so black can't castle. If he wants to do it, he'll have to do it by hand via king f8, g8, h7. But in the meantime, he can do other constructive things with his queenside pieces. So bishop d3 is played, and now b5. Castles, and now b4. Knight e2, and I love this move. I was glad that he spotted this as a very typical type theme in the Benoni. You don't see it a whole lot in appearance. But Pedram is well versed, and he spotted this right away and went down this road. And to be honest with you, I think the black is equalized. Maybe queen to d3 here might be a small improvement, but black just plays knight to c5, and I think he's still got equality. But he goes to c1 to keep that battery on the h-pawn, which rules out black castling at least. Bishop b7, bishop d4, bishop takes, knight on e takes, queen to c5. I do want to point out a pretty typical pattern here that, in case you're not used to it, this happens quite often. Okay, you got the queen on a5 and the bishop on b7 hitting that pawn on d5. Don't take that pawn when the knight is sitting on d4. Why? Well, here's why. If you take the pawn, he can play knight to b3, hits the queen. The queen has nowhere to go to protect the bishop. After queen b6, bishop takes d5, white's winning. However, after the move in the game, queen c5, things are just dead level. And play just progressed on, each player trying to get a little more position out of this. This is a nice trade by Pedram, in my opinion. And he does castle by hand. Now here I thought he should play knight to d7, and I think that black is doing fine after that. He plays king to g7. I don't know, it just seemed a little bit exposing, but I guess it's not. I guess it's a matter of personal taste. c3 is played, and queen to b6, now a5, pushing the queen back further, but she gets on her own battery with the bishop on d5. Now c takes b4, and Pedram just makes that a gambit pawn. This is, I'll get it some other time. Queen to e1, knight to c6, knight to c3, and bishop to b3. This is better than knight takes b4. b5, a takes b5, bishop takes b5. Alright, so material balance has been restored. e5, bishop takes c6, rook takes c6, queen to d2, rook a c6, pressuring that a pawn, rook to d3, pressuring the d pawn. Now I thought d5 was an interesting try here. Pedram played queen to b4, knight to e4. I think the game is still level here. Queen takes, rook takes, and now comes the moment that I dread. Black should play f5 here. Yeah, you hit the knight, chase it away. What harm is that going to cause? And I think probably the best move for white here is to go ahead and play rook a3. And now, don't take the knight, preserve the bishop. You got pawns on both wings, you want to hang on to the bishop. And after knight takes d6, rook takes pawn, rook takes, rook takes. And I think black is a bit better here. It's got the bishop and rook versus the knight and rook, and we discussed that, I think it was in game 1. A queen and knight is a very powerful duo, where a queen and bishop is not so much. But a rook and bishop is often better than a rook and knight, especially if the knight does not have a firm outpost, and in this case it does not. And the b pawn of white may prove to be a weakness, and it might actually be the critical weakness of the game. I don't know what got into Pedram's head here, but he played rook to d8, and I'm going to flip the board. A lot of you know I put quizzes into the videos that I do, so this is your chance, white to play and win. Surely you've spotted it by now, and I'm sorry I called you Shirley. Knight c5. It forks the rook on a6 and the bishop on b3. The reason it does that is because the rook on d8 is pinned to the pawn on d6, so he can't recapture the knight. And Maurice Ashley did a chess-based video on mistakes grandmasters make. And one of the big mistakes that they do is they do not look at a piece that can move to where a pawn is protecting that square. So I don't think Pedram was low on time at all. There's really no excuse that it's just blindness, whatever you want to call it, but it shouldn't happen. Okay, it's a pretty elementary trick. All right, so Pedram went into the think tank here a little too late, and he decided to play on. Personally, I think I would have gave up the ghost, seeing how the other games were going. And we're not really going to give it too much thought on all this because it's kind of ridiculous. Okay, he's trying to drum up some counterplay any way that he can. Maybe he won't see that the knight's attacked. Well, he doesn't give him time to take it. Okay, so at least Pedram's got his king on the side of the board, and maybe he can play for some stalemate tricks if William's not alert. But William would pretty much have to fall asleep not to catch on to that. And rook to c4 here, wanting to trade pieces. He promotes. You know, maybe he should have gone to a knight instead. And then after knight takes e1. Yeah, there's not even any little tricks here. Knight takes e1 is just pure and simple. The game is over. Pedram resigned at this point. I mean, what's black going to do? He could try rook check on e2, but what does that accomplish? Nothing really. Black's just lost. He's not even going to get his little stalemate tricks. Rather embarrassing oversight by Pedram. I don't know what to say, but that's how they ended up. This is the only loss of the night. Other than getting up to that point where that mistake happened, you know, he didn't play f5 to chase the knight away, which to me would have seemed like a natural move, gaining space, making that trade, leaving white with an isolated b-pawn. Let's just go back to that position real quick. Yeah, f5 here. Now if he drops the knight away, we can just go ahead and take the a-pawn, and if he does this, like I said, I think that this is going to be good for black. Instead, we get chess blindness, rook to d8. He started thinking defensively when he needed to keep thinking offensively. And, wow. All right, well, that being said, I mean, you know, it's a mistake, and we all do them. And it didn't hurt the team at all. That's the beauty of it all, because on the other three boards, Arizona just rolled over Seattle. That was beautiful. But notice in this game, white didn't allow himself any weak pawns. But if we get back into this variation here with f5, like I said, now all of a sudden we do have black with a pawn weakness. Or, sorry, we do have white with a pawn weakness. So, you know, that's what he should have been looking out for, seeing what the other games had done. Alright, folks, that's it for this video coverage of week 1. And it was pretty much a rout. The only other team to go 3-1 was Connecticut, down to Miami Sharks 3-1. But Dallas rolled over the LA Vibe 3.5 to 1/2. So LA Vibe are in the lead. So the Western Division after the first round is Dallas is in first place, Arizona second, third and fourth are shared by Rio Grande Osprey and San Francisco Mechanics. Didn't mean to laugh at the team there, buddy. Number 5 would be Seattle, and LA is bringing up the rear with 1/2 point. Now, this is only week 1. Things are sure to change back and forth over the season, and I guarantee you that they will. Next up for the Scorpions will be the Dallas Destiny on September 2nd. Can the Scorpions put a stop to their show of domination? I think they can. And if we field our best team possible, I'm sure they can. And if we field this team, I still think they can. So, tune in next week and see how the Scorpions can do against the so far dominating Dallas Destiny. Thank you for watching, and until next time, good luck.